There we go. So welcome everyone to the Chaos OSPO working group meeting for Thursday, January 8th. Happy New Year. Welcome back. It's good to see everyone. So we have a couple of things on the agenda. Hopefully we can get to both of them. If not, we might, Natalia, need to bump the CMS update to the next meeting, but we'll try to get to it. But the first thing we have on the agenda is Juan Rico is here and is going to talk about the impact to OSPOs for digital sovereignty and the CRA. So with that, I will stop sharing so that Juan can take it from here.
All right. Okay. Could you confirm if you see my screen?
Yeah, looks great. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, thank you for having me and thank you for the invitation. It's always nice to share what we are doing in this area. I was commenting previously with Dawn. Yeah, we target a specific time for the presentation, but then the questions always get wild. So I'm ready for that and also for taking some of them offline. Okay, so just the objectives that I've set for the presentation. It's the first one is navigate the regulatory waters of the CRA. This is something new. It's changing the way the IT industry is working, and it's important to understand what are the things that are happening and how we can rely on them, or what are the role that open source has, and specifically, the different actors that are considered in the CRA. The second one is to prepare ourselves and the companies or institutions we are representing to align with the objectives of different legislative initiatives. And that's really important. It's not only about the text, the legal text, that this is probably things like that lawyers should take care of, but understanding what is the philosophy behind all those regulations and how we can align what they are trying to achieve, what the things that we need to implement. I will share my vision of the key components for a healthy and sustainable open source ecosystem, because especially the CRA, this is one of the main objectives that is pursuing, and finally, how to become an active party in this new scenario. A bit of myself, working for the CLIS Foundation as Senior Manager for ORC, ONIRO, and Cloud Programs. I'm also a member of the CRA Expert Group and involved in the standardization efforts both on ETSI and Sensenec for the CRA. I have been involved in IoT for my whole life. And the most important thing of this slide is I'm not sharing any legal advice. This is just my understanding of how the CRA and the topics I'm going to share can be implemented. So the CRA, that's the first and probably most important aspect I'm going to share today. And the most important thing is that CRA is all about protecting European consumers and businesses. This is the thing that all of us should have in mind. And when they started to build the CRA, it was because they did a research, and they found in 2021 that cybercrime has an impact of 5.5 trillion euros yearly. So that's a huge thing, and the impact on the businesses and then the consumers in Europe was huge. So for that main reason, they started to think on how they can provide means, tools, and regulations to reduce the impact cybercrime has in Europe, and try to understand in the best way they could how the IT industry works to create this regulation. So let's say that the objective is really good, and what they need, or what we need, is to work together to find a way of achieving it. Why the CRA is concentrating so much attention? So it's not only the high level objective, which is of course fine, and I think everyone agrees on. It's also on what are the obligations they are putting on the manufacturers and retailers. And that's important. What the CRA is targeting is manufacturers and retailers. So it's not the open source projects, it's not the open source community, it's not developers. It's only manufacturers and retailers. And the CRA is making them responsible for every single element in the products they are placing in the market. That's also a significant change compared to what happened before. Also, they are responsible through and the whole product life cycle. So it's not how you prepare the product to be put in the market. It's what is happening to it once it's used by your customers. And finally, because this is something different and impacts especially the open source parties that the CRA is making responsible manufacturers and retailers for working on reporting vulnerabilities and fixing them. So those are three of the most important changes that the CRA is providing, and why, or one of the reasons for making it so relevant, and all the noise that is around it has been created. So yeah, we have a clear high-level objective. We have clear definition of what are the responsibilities and who are the ones that should be working on them. How to implement the CRAs when things get a bit more complicated. And we are starting with a challenging implementation timeline. Here, what I'm sharing is just the standardization pyramid. And basically, when the CRA was approved, it was entering force 11th December 2024. We have 3 years to define all the things that need to be implemented. And among those things, it implies 41 new standards that were or are completely new. And that is super challenging because we are addressing a new regulation. We are speaking about new economic actors. We need to involve new people in the development of the standards that usually are not contributing to them. And we need to make the people who is traditionally contributing to standards to understand how open source works. So that is challenging, for not saying crazy. And that's something that needs to be done. That's the reality. What the CRA is requesting is us to work together to build these different standards. I'm not going to get into the standards, but what is important is there are like two main types, two main groups. The types are different term, but the ones that are horizontal, that basically affects everyone, and it's basically obligations that should be implemented by every single product. And we have the verticals that basically affect specific products. Also, for understanding the difference between horizontal and verticals, we have the product categories, and that's also related to the previous pyramid. And we have the full category. 95% of the products will be fall under this category, and that's a good news in terms of the number of new obligations that should be put in place, or the extra work and money that you should put to launch products to the markets, because they are you can self-assess that your product is complies with the CRA. We have the important products, which basically has two main categories, and for this, that requires a third-party assessment of the key elements of the system. So it's some of the parts could be self-assessed, some others should go through third-party assessment. For the critical products, probably they will have certification requirements, so also through third-party, and they are covered by the different vertical standards. And finally, we have the free and open source software, which is self-assessment as the full category, unless they are categorized as critical products. So the definition of those categories is important, because depending on what are the products that you are building, how they fall under this categorization, and what you are trying to build with them. Because I'm not including it here to not make it super complex, but we have some products that combines multiple functionalities and can make or create the doubt of whether this is critical or important, or is it default. So yeah, it's important to understand that we have these four categories. Depending on which is the category your product are falling under, you need to implement specific things to demonstrate compliance with the CRA. And also, it's important to know if you can self-assess your products or you should trust on third-party certification. And yeah, something that is new under the CRA is the roles defined. And when I refer to roles, we have manufacturers and retailers. That's something that everyone knows. But basically are the ones placing products on the market, on the European market. The second category is open source software stewards. And they are essentially code hosting foundations or for profits that can be stewards too if they are not monetizing the project. This is probably one of the most important categories. I'm going to justify the most important statement. The point is that yeah, for open source foundation, it's clear they are going to be stewards, and especially if they are hosting code, they are stewards by definition if they decide to take this role. But for companies, they can play the same, for the same code base, they could be manufacturers and stewards. How to identify the role you are playing depends on your monetization strategy and how you are managing those two separate projects or products. And yeah, the line that is between the two things is really thin, but is well defined by the European Commission in the different guidance documents that they are preparing. So yeah, we should not have in mind that the stewards are only open source foundations. It's basically everyone that is in charge of an open source project that wants to play the role of a steward and yeah, can implement it based on the rules that have been defined for stewards. And finally, the last category is open source maintainers, which is basically hobbyists whose projects are not in scope, but they are widely adopted. So they don't have any direct obligations, but they are indirectly impacted by the CRA. So some specific challenges in terms of cybersecurity. What we have covered so far is basically what are the framework. Now there are specific challenges that affects. The first one is device heterogeneity. The second one is full life cycle management, how to deal with the supply chain complexity, and how to manage the development and release of the different patches. So there are specific problems on top of a new legislative framework that should be also addressed and well understood to provide yeah, an effective implementation of the CRA. So this is basically the CRA in a nutshell. Of course, there are a lot of yeah, side topics that have not been covered in the slides that are important, and I'm happy to take them in the questions. But yeah, for now, it's basically to understand what is the high-level objective, what are the roles that have been defined, what are the different categories that the CRA is defining and the actors, and what are the means that we have to comply with what the CRA is requesting. The other topic is digital sovereignty. And for me, this is something completely different to the CRA. While the CRA is super technical, and it's basically a list of requirements that should be implemented, there would be standards that will help everyone to understand how to comply with those obligations. Digital sovereignty, the way I see it is my degree of freedom with the technology choices I make. And that's also important because both things are happening in parallel, but they have like different approaches. One is more technical, the other one is more related to the choices you make when you are start building products. And well, I'm not a big fan of yeah, for digital sovereignty in terms of where things are developed, but actually what are the main elements that will allow me to continue development of a specific technology or to change a specific component for other. So it's how reliable are the components that I'm using and how much I or how free I am to keep using it or the risk I'm exposed if I select a specific component versus other. So yeah, those both things are the key components for the next part of the presentation. And the main thing is that we are living in a growing regulated world. And that's something that I have discussed with many people. Yeah, the CRA looks scary, especially at the beginning, the first time you face it. But I don't know if the good or bad news is that it's the first, but there will be more. So the sooner we started, the sooner we get ready for this kind of a scenario. And something that is also important is the transformation capacity of open source for the regulations. And open source has many, many good things to comply with the things that the CRA, for instance, is requesting. But we need also to understand what are the benefits or the strengths, what are the risks, and what are the elements that have been already covered by open source communities for a long time that will help us to guide and share with the European Commission in this case, but with the industry in general, how compliance can be made. So as part of the strengths, it's transparency, collaboration, and innovation. Basically, we are trying to build through the regulations more cyber secure, cyber resilient space, and this can be easily achieved if things are transparent, the collaboration happen, yeah, and yeah, the innovation. One of the main drivers for innovation is open collaboration. So that those are three elements that makes open source a strength in terms of comply with regulations that are trying to achieve cybersecurity. But at the same time, we have some risks. The first one is dependencies. Many products rely on upstream open source libraries, but we are just picking them because they feel functionality, and we don't know what is happening behind that. We don't know if the project is healthy or not, if there are many people actively supporting and maintaining it. We just sometimes focus on the functionalities, and that's probably something we need to change. The second element is fragmentation, especially with open source projects are forked. It's difficult to track when we go to vulnerabilities, whether my version is part of has the vulnerability already covered or is vulnerable. So that's one of the risks that we need to address and understand when we integrate open source components, and we need to be compliant with the CRA. And the third element is probably, for me, the most important is the responsibility gap. We cannot, or manufacturers cannot request open source to work for them. It's actually open source is trying to define their own roadmaps and create the functionalities they think they are important for them, not trying to fill the needs of those who are consuming those projects. So that responsibility gap is also important to try to define a new way of exchange or participate or get involved in open source communities. The last part is more related to how secure supply chain can be managed. That's something that open source have been doing for many, many years. So yeah, SBOMs and vulnerability tracking, the CVEs, those kind of things are quite well addressed by the open source community. So yeah, I think that's something that we can share with the manufacturers, especially in those industries that are not related or not so close to how those areas work. So, in summary, regulation impacts implementation and decision making. And I'm trying to split those two things between the technical impact, so new features, more documentation, new processes, those things that affect directly to how the products are developed. And the other one are the non-technical ones. So what's the level of dependency when we select a specific component? Who is the owner? What is the participation I'm going to have in the development of the components I'm consuming? What's the impact if I select one component versus other? My liability if I'm using specific things. So it's important to separate what are the changes that we need to implement on the technical side and how we are going to assess when we are using or consuming or contributing to open source projects from the technical perspective, and what are the areas that we are going to analyze from the non-technical perspective, because they are going to impact you as well. And it's important also to have a clear view on all of them. So before speaking about metrics, just a few obligations that will help to go deeper into the metric size. The first one is obligation. So as I said at the beginning, products should be placed in the market with no known vulnerabilities. So that's an obligation. So we need to be sure that the things that we are putting in the market has gone through an assessment to demonstrate that this is happening. The second part is product with vulnerabilities must report and fix them. So how we are going to identify that our product is affected by a vulnerability, because if we are not aware, or not being aware is not an excuse. You should be um, uh, actively monitoring the health of your products, and for fixing them, how you are going to contribute to that, because you are obliged to fix vulnerabilities if a component or an open source component that you are using in your products has a vulnerability. So understanding what are the things that you can identify to be more effective or more efficient with these two topics is also important, something you need to check before consuming specific components. And the third element is product must be protected during its entire life cycle. So it's important to know whether the project is something that is run by one party or this is a community-driven effort. So there are different elements that should be considered. It's, again, not the functionality or not only the functionality, but all the different risks that you are now exposed when you need to comply with the specific regulations. On the need size is how to maximize your digital autonomy. If something is not working, what I'm going to do. If something decides or someone decides to change the license of a specific component that can clearly affect my product, how can I react to that? So yeah, there are obligations and needs, again, linked to what I said before about the technical and not technical, but in terms of evaluation or a framework or creating a framework for evaluating what are the things that you need to consider. You need to cover both things, those that are closer to the compliance to the technique, to the different regulations, well, that are usually technical, as I said before, but also if you want to create a resilient product, what are the elements that I need to consider to maximize my digital autonomy. So for the indicators to check, I have split in three categories. You are more expert than me on the indicators, but I prefer to focus on the categories and why they are important. And of course, we can discuss later about all the other topics. So the first one is governance and stewardship. Why is important to identify the steward or the supporting organization? Because as we said before, we have now obligations on reporting the vulnerabilities and fixing them. So usually when projects are stewarded, they have a cybersecurity policy and they have ways that will simplify our work or the work of manufacturers that are consuming those components if a vulnerability is identified. Also, the public governance and maintainership is important in the sense that you need to be sure on how decisions are made, what are the risks you are exposed, and how this or what are the number of risks that you are exposed when you are selecting a specific component. And the third element is the number of active maintainers and the continuity signals. I'm using a project that is barely maintained, or this is a really active community that is looking forward to be consumed and to engage with manufacturers. So that would be for me the first category. The second one is a bit more technical, which is more related to the specific requirements that the CRA is imposing, and could be vulnerability handling and transparency. Yeah, the security policy is probably, I would say, the most important one, considering what the CRA is requesting, because that should list what is the approach towards comply with different regulation, or how a specific project will be working on that. But yeah, and this is something that is trying to be covered by the standards in the CRA, but it's also important um, to know how the different open source projects are going to deal with it. First, because open source projects are not obliged to follow the standards. But you as manufacturer need to demonstrate compliance. So those things that are already done by projects don't need to be done by the manufacturers. And yeah, in terms of risk management, your due diligence processes, and the number or the effort that you should put on creating your products before launching them to the market, it's important to analyze all these elements. So yeah, part of the security policy is usually the clear reporting channel, how vulnerabilities are reported and how they are communicating the development of the fixes, the coordinated vulnerability disclosure process, the track record of yeah, advisories fixes, public security advisories or change logs, and the use of standard formats. So yeah, that's super important, because it's not only about what the project is doing for you, but also how easy it will be for you also to demonstrate that you comply with the CRA. And in case there are any problem, how you can cooperate with the project to be sure that yeah, and then the amount of effort that you should put to keep compliant with the regulation is not, well, is the lowest possible to be completely, or to simplify it a lot. Again, if you have a project that has a good list of who are using this component and vulnerability is found, you can work together with all the other entities that are using that component. If you don't have that, you need to demonstrate that you have started working on yourself or by yourself on developing fixes for vulnerabilities. So yeah, then the number of options and the list of things that are important now, especially when focusing on supporting the full life cycle for those products, yeah, are completely different than when we thought on how to build the product until it is released. So yeah, those elements are super important right now. And the third category is yeah, supply chain hygiene, secure development, and operational security. And here I can start with an infinite list. Yeah, the dependencies, the SBOMs, code reviews, release controls. I mean, yeah, I put just a few here, but probably these are the things that are more operational to the projects, but gives a clear indication of if, again, if something happens, which is the case, how much I can trust the project I'm using. And this is an important element to, yeah, to decide, well, between two components, which is the one that will work better for my needs. So those are the three categories. There are, yeah, a lot of things that I have not covered today, but there will be, or they are super important. The role of stewards. Well, I have a link to the white paper that we have created in ORC. Who can be a steward? What are the responsibilities? How they interact with the different institutions that they need to do. voluntary security attestations. That's probably the key element to assure a sustainable open source ecosystem, because the attestations will be like documents or assets that will demonstrate the posture of the projects towards the compliance with the different regulations, and that's something that is supposed to be purchased somehow. Could be by contributing to the project, or basically pay for that, to demonstrate that the project you are consuming is well aligned with the CRA, so that the obligations in the due diligence process will be much lower if you can count on attestation. So just two super big topics that well, some of them will have specific sessions during FOSDEM for a few hours. So those are important elements that I'm not covering, but yeah, you should take a look, and I'm including here a couple of links that can help to start. And yeah, that's also an important thing. The work just started. It's not finished. It's not even close to be finished. And yeah, we are using the CRA as a way of identifying also the challenges that open source community will face. And we have identified, just for naming a few, clarity on the text. The text is not written by people who are experts on open source. And try to understand. I mean, we started in the Open Regulatory Compliance, the FAQ, and it took less than a week to be on 100 questions. So 100 active conversations trying to identify what the text is referring to. So that was one of the challenges, and yeah, my prediction is that this will happen every time a new regulation is launched, because the ones that are writing the laws are not technical experts, and there are a lot of gray zones. So it's important to define how we can, as a community, yeah, identify what they want to say and how we can propose a solution for them. Second thing is the interfacing with the regulators. And that's super important, because if you just identify the gray zones but you are not reporting them back to the regulators, yeah, we are not making a huge advance. So it's important to define how to effectively communicate with the regulatory bodies, as well as contribute to the standards. As I said at the beginning, open source has not been yet very much involved in the standardization. Now I'm super happy to see how many of the colleagues of the open source community are actively contributing both to the horizontal and vertical standards. Still, there is a lot of things that needs to be updated, because standards are quite old-fashioned organizations, and they are not used to working, or the way open source work and standards are not the same, and that's a challenge. And finally, raise awareness. That's yeah, the last point I included in the slide, but it's probably one of the most important. One of the things that we are seeing is that people is not aware of what is coming, so they cannot contribute back to the proposal, or to propose solutions to it. So yeah, basically this is what we are trying to achieve with the open regulatory compliance. I'm not going to make a sales pitch of the working group, but just to mention it. Yeah, basically what we are trying to do is five things. To create a neutral forum, one of the things is yeah, regulations affects too many people and too many stakeholders, and how to create some space that will allow them to work together. Work on regulatory awareness and ecosystem impact, best practices and sustainable solutions. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, and as I said at the beginning, with the SBOM case, we have already solved some of the challenges that the regulation are putting. So the role we have is also share those things with the regulators and the industry. yeah, education and implementation and institutional collaboration. Yeah, we are a lot of people already working on it. But yeah, probably the most important thing, and I want to close before the conclusions with that, is yeah, don't wait. Join existing initiatives. Of course, if you join or the Open Regulatory Compliance, I will be super happy and you will be welcomed by a great group of people. But there are other initiatives also working on this domain. And it's important to act as a group because this is where the strength of the open source community will come. So join some of the initiatives that are working on this topic. And yeah, to close, the first thing is that the regulatory obligations make more important than ever understanding the dynamics of open source projects because, as I explained, they have multiple implications and the decisions are yeah are going to impact you not only could make you liable. Let's put it like that. The second is being part of the project is the easiest way to assure compliance, resilience, and sovereignty. And that's something I want to highlight. Usually, it's not to yeah consume and support communities, but also being part of it. So that's super or a key element in terms of facilitating your compliance journey. The third element is that there are multiple roles you can play, and it's important to decide based on the risk you are exposed to. Of course, you should not put 10 developers in each of the projects you are consuming, but define what are the key ones that you need to get involved and the level of involvement that you have based on yeah, your exposure to that and keep contributing and developing open source. There are a lot of questions about, yeah, I should shut down my projects. No, that's super clear. The object of the regulation is building a sustainable ecosystem, both in terms of security, but also in terms of economic sustainability. So, yeah, that's my presentation. Now I'm open to get questions.
Okay, thank you so much. We have 8 minutes for questions since we end this meeting at 10 till the hour. Just a note that a few of us have been dropping notes in the meeting doc with some links to chaos metrics, models, guides that apply to the indicators that Juan mentioned, along with some links to some of the open regulatory compliance working group stuff. So who has questions?
Hi, Dawn, and hi, Juan. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really excellent, and I need to dig into the white paper. One of the questions I have in terms of encouraging stewardship is the value prop to the steward, why they want to take on that responsibility. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is there work that has already been done in ORC around that specific use case?
Yeah. Mhm. Um, there are two ways of approaching the stewardship. And I'm going to skip completely one, which is for open source foundations, because there is no risk of being accused of monetizing things. So for open source, it's quite simple. I think it's important for manufacturers. And that's probably one of the biggest decisions that manufacturers should make with the open source projects they are actively maintaining. Because if you are a steward, the level of obligations that you have are lower. The liabilities, basically, you don't have any liability. You just need to demonstrate that you have your cybersecurity policy in place. You are not monetizing any service related to that specific component or project. And yeah, I think that It's a matter and depends a bit on what is the country that you are operating. Because the biggest risk is that a market surveillance authority is telling that you are monetizing an open source project, and they force you to become a manufacturer instead of steward. That's the because that change implies that basically you have to do everything and demonstrate that you are compliant in a completely different way. But besides that, and that's well, in terms of the questions that we are sharing with the European Commission for the guidance, that's probably the most important or the biggest group of questions that we are going or we are sharing already is related to that. And we have asked to provide specific examples because, yeah, we have a lot of companies in the working group that are super concerned about this, and they don't want to get any issue. I think that the main incentive, yeah, again, is try to demonstrate that you are creating a good community around of a specific project. Reduce the number of obligations by creating this community, or the number of activities by creating those community, not obligations. And yeah, that would be like the main element. But this is something that is still, I would say, we need more examples from the European Commission, basically to make sure that manufacturers that decide to become stewards of specific projects are not going to face any problem when it comes to, yeah, a request from the specific market surveillance authority.
I'm wondering if there's also a carrot that is being offered within the European Commission, that if there is a steward for a specific project, that would allow a subsequent manufacturer or consumer of that project to be able to sign off on certain obligations, or be able to say, hey, this box is already checked. For instance, there's a security policy already associated with the project. But since there's no stick associated with the steward, there's no real metric to say, hey, the steward has to reach this certain level of security compliance, or if they fail to do so, there's nothing that sticks back to them. So I don't know if it really does come to fruition as being something that a non-steward or a consumer could rely on.
Well, the steward needs to demonstrate that the security policy that they are implementing on the projects they are stewarding complies with or is aligned with the regulation. So that's an important point. It's not, yeah, the security or the cybersecurity policy should provide enough means for the ones that are consuming those projects to be sure that yeah, this is something safe I can rely on. The other thing is attestations. We haven't gone through attestations, but the attestations or the Commission has defined it as an economic mechanism to make the projects more sustainable. So they can, through the attestation or the money they get through attestations, pay for implementing the security features that the projects will require. So there are multiple things. It's not only one element that will make decide whether I should be a steward or not, but to consider what is the whole thing and what is my level of exposure to a specific project. If it's something that is not core for my business, probably I can basically steward it and then open source it, and yeah, try to create a community around it. If it's something that, yeah, it's not critical and probably we have a diverse community, this is something I can donate and I reduce my exposure to any potential liability that market surveillance authorities, because that's the next challenge that we are facing in ORC, and it's one of the big objectives for this year is start engaging with the national countries. We have done, I think, or the open source community has done a great job with the European Commission on educating them and make them understand how open source work. Now we need to do the same for all the other countries. Because the first text that we have read from different countries are not very. I mean, it's the same feeling we had when we first read the drafts of the CRA. So it's the same level of misconceptions, and yeah, that's important. And if there is no extension on the deadline for the entry in force of the CRA, I'm sure that there will be countries that will be regulating the IT industry without a clear understanding of the open source world. And that's, from my point of view, a big risk.
Okay, we are about out of time. We could squeeze in one more quick question if somebody has a quick one. Okay. Just two quick reminders. CHAOSScon EU is January 29th. That is the Thursday right before FOSDEM. We are in the heart of Brussels, near the central train station. It's not too late to register, so we'd love to have more people at CHAOSScon EU. So if you're going to be around, feel free to register. And also, just a quick note that the Open Source Summit North America opened their CFP. So it closes on February 8th, so people don't have a ton of time. The event itself is in May in Minneapolis. So if people are interested in submitting a talk for that, the CFP is open. And with that, thank you so much, Juan, for coming and spending time with us. And thank you everybody for coming. This was I think, a really interesting meeting. So I hope to see more of you in some of these meetings every other week, same time, same place. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.